The UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak is planning to hold a spending review, and it will not be pretty. Austerity has been ruled out, but I don't see how that will happen. It's looking likely that £4 billion will be the shortfall in the budgets of local administrations. So councils are planning to gut essential services in response to these cuts. Local leaders have said that they will be forced to reduce or eliminate services, including those for adult care and children. Councils are demanding a rescue package in the Chancellor's public spending review. The Local Government Association is predicting a £4 billion shortfall next year if central government does not step in. One example is West Sussex Council. They are facing a £44 million shortfall next year. On the chopping block is a cut to early years funding and subsidised bus services. According to reports, they're also planning to end Help at Home. This essential service assists nearly 700 vulnerable older people with basic domestic tasks such as cleaning and shopping for them. In a London council, subsidised transport for disabled residents will be cut, while Manchester City say they will be forced to cut 20% off the budget that normally goes to help rough sleepers. So is it just the pandemic that has forced these councils into this dire situation? Well, no. 10 years of Tory austerity has meant that many councils were struggling to provide services to those who need them, and now this will be a massive blow to their ability to maintain, in some cases, even basic services for the public. The most vulnerable will be at the sharp end here. This is according to Caroline Abrams, who is the charity director at Age UK. She said, and I quote, "If anyone wondered if the government's strategy of expecting councils to fund social care locally had run out of road, they finally know the answer now. Not only have councils exhausted other services they can reasonably be expected to cut, local social care needs are not correlated with the amounts of funding different areas are able to raise." The Local Government Association is now calling on Rishi Sunak to inject an extra £8.7 billion into local government in 2021. This is to cover the forecast £4 billion shortfall, plus extra money to improve services and help with raising demand. Now, funding for local council is just one aspect of the Chancellor's spending review. The government have promised not to return to the days of austerity, but a public pay freeze is probably one of the best signposts that we're heading in that direction. Now, the government will do everything it can to avoid using the A word, but austerity in some form is going to hit. The government have promised to allocate funds above inflation, but it is expected that any increase in funding will be linked to cuts in increases in public sector pay, so a pay freeze. In a video where Matt Hancock appeared, he promised that public sector pay in the NHS would not be affected. Sunak will attempt to play the public sector workers against the private sector ones. He will no doubt play the private sector hasn't had a pay increase, so that type of line. A serious issue with public sector pay is that it has fallen by 1.5% when adjusted for inflation. This has resulted in massive problems when it comes to hiring or maintaining staff levels. In order to win some political support from the hard right within the party or from those who don't know any better, it's expected that Sunak will declare a cut to foreign aid. While I talked about this on this channel before, that aid is a political tool, it should be reformed, not cut. The slogan that no doubt was coined by one of Dominic Cummings' minions, levelling up, will of course be mentioned a lot when Sunak delivers his speech in Parliament this week on the spending review. Levelling up was something that Boris Johnson had promised at the beginning of the year, before the pandemic, but we can expect to hear more about it again. Boris needs the so-called red wall in the north. He needs to convince them that he hasn't forgotten them, so expect a few crumbs to be thrown their way. Finally, there's Brexit and the pandemic. Of course, while Brexit was supposed to be a net win for the UK, it seems that it will need a bit more money, a bit more cash than appeared on the side of a bus. Funds will need to be set aside to deal with the likely chaos that's going to appear in January. Ferries and planes may need to be hired at the last minute to ship goods if ports are blocked or there are shortages. The furlough scheme, which has been helping so many people and was extended beyond the beginning of the year, needs funding, and this will be extremely expensive. All in all, Sunak will be pumping money into one place, perhaps even a financial black hole, while forcing local councils to cut costs. Austerity 2.0 is clearly on the cards. Brexit and the pandemic saw to that. Ordinary people are going to experience the cuts firsthand. Now, it may not be immediate, but it will be soon. Austerity is coming because there are very few ways to avoid it. Now, to raise finance, Rishi Sunak can go in three possible ways. He can borrow, but the problem with this is that public debt at the moment is above £2 trillion. This is for the first time ever. This is equal to 103% of GDP, or what the country produces in a year. This is not sustainable unless you crash the pound, but that carries its own problems. He could also raise taxes. However, the Tories are dead set against this, and I think it could bring down the government if they were actually to do so. It would most likely be taxes that would be raised on the upper earners, but this, as I said before, is against the Tory party ethos and would result in rebellions. You can't really just tax the poor, working class or middle class, as that would in turn damage the economy, because they would have less spending power, and this would result in less revenue for the exchequer. The last option, and the most likely option under a Tory government, is to cut spending. We can see the first steps of this with the public sector pay freeze. This is austerity. Now, councils are worried about this as they need to provide essential services to the public, as I said before. It's likely that social services would be cut, perhaps in a hidden way, by boosting at the same time universal credit, a type of give with one hand and take with another. People would think that they're better off, but in reality they would not be. And we've seen numerous examples of this before. In a contrast to this, Boris Johnson last week talked about spending more on the military. This is madness. How can you justify spending money on tanks and aircraft when the poorest in society are seeing services that they rely on, desperately need, disappearing? 2021, or even this week, will see the start of Tory Austerity 2.0. Unfortunately, the working class voters who turned up for Boris Johnson in 2019 and gave him an 80-seat majority will see him being able to push through whatever cuts he wants. This will not just be a winter of malcontent, but perhaps a decade of it. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.